Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Adapting and Expanding High Tunnel Organic Vegetable Production by Dr. Xin Zhao of the University of Florida. Dr. Zhao is a professor in the Horticultural Sciences Department at the University of Florida. Her position provides research and education programs in sustainable and organic vegetable production with the overall goal of improving environmental stewardship, crop health and productivity, food quality, and farm profitability. So with that, I'm going to turn off my video and hand you over the screen control here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alice. And thank you for this great opportunity. Very happy to be here. And thanks to everyone who are joining us for this webinar. I would really like to thank all my colleagues who are on this team, basically working with us to introduce and develop high tunnel organic vegetable production systems in the Southeast. Again, I have all my co-authors here listed from University of Florida, Florida A&M University, USDA-ARS, as well as University of Georgia. I also like to thank the funding support from the USDA Organic Agricultural Research and Extension Initiative, who funded us for this four-year research, education, and extension project. And I would also like to thank all the students, staff, and our colleagues who actively participated and involved in some of the work to be presented today on this project. Indeed, this is an integrated project building upon a tremendous teamwork. In addition to the people listed here, I know that many other people also involved in this project and working with us on many other different aspects of this particular project. So thank you to everyone who have collaborated with us. So today I'm going to highlight some of the activities and key fundings from this recently completed project. Focused on developing and evaluating sustainable high tunnel production systems to promote organic vegetable production in the Southeast. Many of you are probably very familiar with protected agriculture and especially the use of high tunnels for vegetable production. So a recent survey in the States to look at vegetable growers' adoption of protected agriculture, you can actually see that there is a growing interest in recent years in terms of growing in different types of protected culture systems and growing indoors. And high tunnels actually have been involved as a very important tool to actually support protected crop production. And season extension also is identified as the main purpose of using high tunnels for growing different types of vegetable crops in the States. Not only for conventional vegetable cropping systems, the recent survey in the States on organic crop production also showed that, in fact, the interest among organic growers is also growing in terms of using protected culture systems. So this recent survey from USDA actually highlighted the increase between 2016 to 2018 in terms of the increase in organic vegetable production under protected culture systems. So again, you can see that we are carrying out research, education, and extension programs in response to this particular interest in using high tunnels as a production tool to promote organic vegetable production, especially placing an emphasis on the environment that we are facing in the Southeast in the States. So as I said earlier, many of you probably are familiar with the high tunnel systems. So again, it's a very simple type, relatively speaking, a type of protected agriculture structure, typically covered by by plastic film, can be one single layer or double layer, depending upon where you are, your major purposes, your crops, and passively ventilated, with the main objective of extending the growing season. And it really provides an intermediate level of environmental control between, compared to open field and greenhouse systems. So in the States, many growers actually have received financial and technical support from the USDA NRCS Equip High Tunnel Initiative Program. So really in the last decade, probably more than a decade, this particular program really has fueled an interest in the States in terms of using high tunnels to promote high-value specialty crop production across the country. NRCS also recognizes the multifaceted benefits of using high tunnels, not just to extend the growing season, but all the way from enhancing soil and plant quality and reducing nutrient losses and improving air quality, and also to really provide a system to help promote local production systems and providing high quality, nutritious, fresh produce to the local communities. So I just want to mention that, again, from a production perspective, we are using high tunnels as a management tool, as a protected culture system. At the same time, really, we should also consider it as a risk management tool as well as a conservation practice. This is probably where NRCS is coming from in terms of promoting this particular system to really help not only to promote plant productivity and health, but also to improve soil quality, soil health, and in increasing resource use efficiency, and again, to achieve a variety of conservational goals. So really, this particular project, we are trying to carry out integrated interdisciplinary research programs to look at how we actually can help growers in terms of adapting high tunnel systems to organic vegetable production. We actually started out with a 1-year planning grant funded by USDA, so which really allowed us to establish a partnership to explore integrated systems for sustainable high tunnel organic vegetable production in the Southeast region. And throughout this 1-year project, we really engaged a wide group of stakeholders to help us conduct needs assessment, which really advised us in terms of identifying research priorities and to address stakeholders' needs in terms of developing research projects that will actually help them to improve management in terms of using high tunnel systems for enhancing organic vegetable production. So 6 areas were actually identified out of that planning grant, all the way from pest and disease management to crop rotation, crop selection, the use of cover crops, as well as soil fertility management, and also the ways that we can actually implement to promote biological control and attracting pollinators. And also, of course, economic viability is the bottom line, and also environmental management in terms of ventilation and temperature control. So again, this really provides a very important framework for us to develop a 4-year integrated project in the following round. So again, we were very successful in terms of securing funding for the next step in terms of carrying out the work to basically address those major research priorities identified through our planning grant. So again, for this overall project I'm going to present today in terms of highlighting some key research findings, the long-term goal there is to develop sustainable high tunnel system to promote the growth and expansion of organic vegetable production in the Southeast. And building upon those priority areas identified in the planning grant, we really try to focus on the following specific objectives. Assessing the efficacy of environmental control measures, for example, using different type of shading materials and also the fogging system in terms of improving the performance of organically grown vegetables, and we focus on solanaceous vegetables as well as leafy greens for that objective. We also looked at crop responses in high tunnels in terms of, to the planting time, and really trying to see how crops are responding to different environmental conditions as different growers, in different regions may actually may have different planting schedules. And also, the other aspect we really looked at, particularly here in Florida, is to see how we can actually develop integrated soil and nutrient management practices to enhance organic vegetable health and productivity and quality at the same time, to really improve the nutrient use efficiency and try to enhance nutrient availability. Of course, we focus primarily on nitrogen so that the supply of nitrogen throughout the whole season would actually match crop demand, in that case, to reduce or minimize nutrient losses. So again, this is a very integrated project. We also involved plant pathologists and entomologists to look at the disease and pest management aspects, for example, to monitor plant pathogens impacting high-value vegetable crops in organic production systems, and trying to explore different management practices and also integrative strategies to actually manage major disease problems in organic high tunnel systems. For the pest management aspect, we also try to monitor both pests and beneficial populations in a high tunnel, and trying to understand the dynamics so that we can actually develop specific management strategies to help organic vegetable growers using high tunnels. And let's see, we are also trying to provide the foundation in terms of economic viability of high tunnel vegetable production, and trying to identify factors that would likely influence the adoption among organic growers of high tunnel production systems. Another interesting aspect on this project is that we throughout the project period, we also conducted on-site, and also due to pandemic, we moved online as well, assessments of research trial plots. So this is actually a very interesting aspect in this particular work led by Dr. Mickey Swisher, and really allowing us to get feedback directly from stakeholders, especially growers, so that we can implement those feedback in a timely manner into our research and extension project to better address their needs. So again, just giving you that major framework in terms of our project. And now I'm going to use the next 30 minutes also to basically discuss some of the interesting fundings from this particular project in Florida and in Georgia. So the first one I'd like to discuss with you is focused on the environmental measures that we evaluated to see how we can actually better adapt the crop to the high tunnel environment to improve crop performance. So in North Georgia, this particular study led by Dr. Tim Coulon, looking at different planting dates, as well as different methods in terms of modifying the growing environment by using shade cloth, in this case, 30% shade cloth, and also a fogging system at the crop canopy to see how we can actually help alleviate the heat stress on the leafy green crops to improve their growth. So you can actually see that there's some interesting findings in terms of how the microclimate conditions were impacted by the shade. So the shade cloth actually reduced the soil temperature as well as the air temperature compared to unshaded high tunnel. But actually, you can see the air temperature is actually higher compared to open field. So again, using shaded tunnel, we're not really seeing a clear reduction in terms of air temperature compared to the open field. But again, with shade being added to the high tunnel, you are providing a cooler environment compared to unshaded structure. And we also noticed that the shade actually, interestingly enough, it actually maintained a higher level of soil moisture at nighttime, not during the day, but at nighttime. And you can also see the light intensity reduction by the use of high tunnel as well as the shaded tunnel, of course. The shaded tunnel resulted in around 50% of light intensity reduction. Without the shade, the intensity reduction was around 30%. So in terms of fogging at the canopy level, this is also very intriguing because you can actually see that doesn't matter if it's during the day or night, the soil moisture level was better maintained by using the fogging system at the canopy level compared to inside the high tunnel, no fogging system was used. And also the leaf wetness level was also increased by using the fogging system. So overall, early planting increased the yields of basil and lettuce, but didn't really have major impact. Actually, you can see from this figure that early planting resulted in a lower yield for arugula compared to later planting. Again, in this particular case, we're looking at earlier with higher ambient temperature and later with a relatively cool environment to see, how different types of environmental management in tunnels would actually help the plants adapt to the growing conditions. So the other aspect, which is interesting here, is the plant nutrient status in the leaves. As you can see that shade actually offers some interesting impact in terms of increasing certain mineral contents in lettuce and arugula, but there is a lack of effect in basil. Another study conducted in North Georgia is looking at, again, how lettuce, in this particular case, across different types, involving different genotypes in terms of their performance or their adaptation to this environment by actually planting them in early June, which is in the summertime, to see if we can actually get benefits in terms of using shaded high tunnel structure as well as managing the sidewalls to provide ventilation. So in this particular study, the harvest was conducted in mid-July, so it's relatively quick growing crop. And you can see from our key findings here that the shaded structure did not really cause any reduction in air or soil temperature compared to the open field system. However, it actually, by using the shade on top of the high tunnel, actually reduced the air temperature compared to unshaded high tunnel. And of course, you are going to encounter this significant reduction caused by shade in terms of light intensity, but potentially this may actually help promote or help improve, in this case, lettuce growth in that shaded low light environment, especially in the middle of the summer. And this work actually was published in an extension article. So if you're interested, feel free to explore this link. And Dr. Coulon was also suggesting to growers that perhaps you don't have to use the plastic film like a typical high tunnel structure to grow with shade to grow lettuce in the middle of the summer. Maybe shade cloth alone can actually potentially work even better. So in North Florida, we also looked at this type of work in terms of selecting different types of lettuce and genotypes to see how high tunnel structures could actually help them in terms of handling the heat during the summertime and to promote the supply of locally available leafy greens, especially salad greens, in this case, leaf lettuce. So as you can see, in North Florida, this work is led by Dr. Alex Bocas. So in Quincy, Florida, he actually has a very unique high tunnel structure. This is a top vented high tunnel structure that he used to do this work, and comparing a number of lettuce cultivars across different types, and particularly paying attention when actually selecting those cultivars in terms of their resistance or tolerance to bolting, as well as heat tolerance. So in this particular study, he actually found out that overall, the health of plants grown in high tunnels was actually at a much higher level inside the tunnel with shade compared to the open field conditions. As you can see here in the last column. And also, if we look at the vigor, this is, again, based on the visual ratings and putting them into different categories and looking at the distribution of those different categories. So you can actually see that the lettuce plants grown in high tunnels, they are more vigorous, and the sizes are also relatively larger compared to those grown in open field. And the overall improvement of plant health is very encouraging. So again, he's also continuing this work to provide further recommendation in terms of growing lettuce in the summer in this type of shaded high tunnel structure. So in southern Georgia, the work led by Dr. Juan Carlos Diaz Press is looking at tomato production and lettuce production as affected by different types of shading materials and also planting dates. For tomato production, he also looked at different colors in terms of plastic mulches. So here, I just want to summarize some of the key findings from his work. So with respect to tomato production inside the tunnels compared to black plastic mulch, the white mulch actually improved plant height and stem diameter and overall growth of the plants, but by the end of the season did not really impact fruit yields. We also noticed that under the shaded structure, the light intensity reduction tend to reduce marketable fruit yield in the case of tomato. So his recommendation is that perhaps you should just use the shade cloths partially throughout the season or during the production season, perhaps at the beginning, to help alleviate the heat stress. But once the heat challenge is not going to persist later in the season, for example, after mid-October, the shade nets should be removed to further promote tomato fruit production. And in terms of disease management, one of the major diseases they encountered during this particular trial is the tomato yellow leaf curl. It's a type of viral disease transmitted by whiteflies. So in this particular case, they did not really observe any consistent impacts from the shade nets and plastic mulch. However, they did actually see the variation or differential responses of cultivars to the disease infection. So again, some of the cultivars, for example, in this case, red snapper is not recommended because it's highly susceptible to TYLC. So growers need to pay much attention if the whitefly pressure and also the disease pressure is very high. Resistant cultivars need to be considered, especially in high tunnel production systems. So for the lettuce trials across different planting dates in Tifton, southern Georgia, his group looked at a series of plantings all the way from October 1st to February the 3rd to see how lettuce cultivars are responding to the wide range of environmental conditions inside organically managed high tunnels. So again, the plant growth, especially fresh weight, varied among the planting dates and likely associated with the temperature and other microclimate conditions throughout the season across different planting dates. And later planting, especially after December 10th, tend to be more favorable to promote crop yield of lettuce. And also they saw that certain types of lettuce cultivars planted in October and November tend to have reduced fresh yield. And interestingly, kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier in terms of the environmental conditions on nutrient status in leafy grains, they also found out that, again, the leaf nitrogen, potassium, for example, and calcium tend to increase, but magnesium tend to decrease in later planting dates. So again, in this case, environmental conditions may also have an impact on nutrient uptake and mineral status in those lettuce cultivars. So in Florida here, particularly in my program, as part of this integrated project, we are looking at evaluating or developing integrated soil and nutrient management programs for high tunnel organic vegetable production. So in this case, we actually looked at leafy grains, followed by tomato, and then going back to cover crop. So again, started with cover crop planting with cowpea in the summer, and followed by leafy grains and then tomatoes, and putting this whole research into the context of crop rotation and involving different types of locally available compost products, as well as different methods in terms of using granular organic fertilizer versus the liquid fertilizer. And this 3-year study really helped us understand how different management practices would actually impact nutrient supply availability and how they actually match crop demand throughout the season as affected by different approaches in terms of using cover crops, organic amendment, in this case composts, as well as organic fertilizer. And also for tomato season, we introduced the management of grafting as well. So we have comparison between grafted and ungrafted plants for the tomato season. So just quickly to show you that at the production site, our soil is very sandy with very low organic matter content, below 1%. The 3 major types of compost products we used are locally available. As you can see that they have, I would not say a very large range of variation, but they do differ in terms of their carbon to nitrogen ratio and as well as nutrient content. Here I just showed nitrogen as an example. We basically applied 10 tons per acre for the yard waste and manure-based compost. And then just a quarter of that application rate for vermicompost, because vermicompost is much more expensive and also tend to have a higher level of nutrient concentrations. So for the organic fertilizers, we're looking at granular versus liquid programs. So we actually decided to go to 2 extremes. So for the leafy grains, we had pre-planned application of granular fertilizer versus weekly application of organic fertilizer. For the tomato season, we also had everything applied. No, not everything, but we actually had pre-plant application of organic fertilizer plus site dressing throughout the season as one treatment in comparison to the use of liquid fertilizers throughout the whole season without using any pre-plant organic fertilizer. So again, you can see all the detailed information here in terms of compositions of those 2 different types of fertilizers that we're using. And you may actually guess which one is actually more affordable than the other. Well, just to summarize very quickly here in terms of what we see with respect to crop productivity in terms of yield. So the cowpea cover crop did not really show any consistent impact on crop yield for leafy grains and tomatoes. However, we are observing very interesting impacts from the use of compost as well as different organic fertilization programs. So just very briefly here, the use of compost promoted plant growth as well as yield for the entire season. And the use of liquid fertilizer seemed to better meet crop demand for nutrients, especially in for nitrogen in this particular trial that we focus on throughout the whole season. So again, we would like to point out that when growers are developing integrated nutrient management programs, they need to look at how different practices can actually work together to promote the supply of available nutrients and also to match crop demand at different critical stages throughout the whole season to improve crop health, yield, and quality. Besides that, I really want to spend a minute also to stress another interesting aspect in terms of those management practices as part of the integrated nutrient management program in terms of their impact on soil health. So we actually send out the soil samples at the end of each year after completing all the cycles within the context of crop rotation to a commercial lab to actually measure physical, chemical, and biological parameters in relation to soil health. So in this case, you can see, I'm just going to share some of the results here to highlight the findings. So which is kind of consistent to what I just mentioned in relation to crop productivity. So for the overall fertility level or scores that we're seeing here, interestingly enough, at the end of each year, we're actually seeing a higher level of fertility score in the granular organic fertilizer treatment in comparison with the liquid. Keep in mind that the liquid fertilization program actually promoted better yield compared to granular. But again, at the end of each year, we seem to detect a higher level of soil fertility in the granular fertilization program, which actually indicates that, yes, liquid fertilizer is likely doing a better job in terms of releasing available nutrients and meeting crop demand throughout the season. And although granular fertilizer tend to be less expensive and probably in many cases easier to apply without using fertigation system, we got to be a little careful here in terms of understanding how the nutrient release pattern is going to be by using different type of granular fertilizers to actually meet crop demand by releasing those nutrients throughout the season, because we know that a lot of organic nutrient sources, they have to undergo decomposition, mineralization to actually unlock those available nutrients to actually meet crop demands. So in terms of compost, we are actually seeing some interesting interaction effects between compost and organic fertilizer in terms of, certain use of compost would actually promote the availability of nutrients from organic fertilizers. So in this case, I'm showing you some, I'm showing you the impact of compost on soil health scores based on the analysis of soil samples at end of each production year. So you can actually see that all three types of available, locally available compost, they actually promoted not only soil organic matter content, but also the overall soil health score, again, analyzed by this commercial soil testing lab compared to without compost control. So this is very consistent at each year and also throughout the 3-year project period. And I also want to mention that in this case, I'm just presenting you information from the analysis of the soil samples from the 15 centimeter depth. So if we actually put everything that we analyzed into this multi-regression model, you can actually clearly see, again, another way in terms of understanding the difference between compost treatments and the control without compost. You can actually see that the yard waste and cow manure compost, they're very similar in terms of their impact on different types of soil health parameters. And they are also well differentiated from the vermicompost treatment as well as the no compost treatment. So next, I'm going to switch the gear here to look at the disease and pest management work as part of this particular project. For the disease monitoring and identification, we actually, for the studies in Citra, particularly focused on the tomato trials that we have conducted over 3 years in this project, tomato leaf mold appeared to be the major disease problem that we encountered, and followed by powdery mildew. And we had other minor disease problems in this project, but they did not really present a major issue. So the tomato leaf mold, as I mentioned, it was very, very persistent throughout the season. And it was very challenging to actually manage this disease problem, especially when you actually saw first time noticing, probably early on noticing this disease problem, the progress of the disease was very fast. So really it's going to be very challenging because of the favorable environmental conditions created in the high tunnel tomato production system. It was very challenging to actually control this disease. So we also conducted some on-farm trials later on to actually let grower monitor their disease and pest problems by sending us some samples. And interestingly enough, we actually did not detect tomato leaf mold or powdery mildew problems in growers' tunnels. And early blight, for example, caused by Alternaria in tomato and also Fusarium were actually identified by growers in their tunnels. So you can actually see maybe different types of high tunnel structures and different site-specific conditions may actually promote or lead to different major disease problems. And as I said earlier, it's very challenging once you actually notice the issue and you're trying to manage, and then trying to use different types of organic fungicides. It's just going to be very, very challenging in terms of keeping things under control because of the favorable environment that was already there, being so conducive. So that is something conducive. That is something that we have realized in terms of the importance of developing integrated management program, particularly utilizing disease resistance in crops and specific cultivars. So again, that really need to be the first step when growers are choosing different crops in crop rotation or using cover crops and different types of cultivars, paying attention to utilize the resistance in different genotypes. So for the pest monitoring, one of the major approaches that we use is to basically put up the yellow sticky cards randomly throughout the high tunnel system, in this case in Central Florida, to see what type of pest problems we encountered, along with beneficial insects that we actually observed. So during this project in Central Florida, we have identified major pest problems coming from whiteflies and thrips. So again, those emerged as two main pest problems. And we have other minor issues as well with aphids and leaf miners, for example. And the beneficial insects primarily included parasitoid wasps, as well as long-legged flies. And you can also see the dynamics of the populations of the pests in this particular case, whiteflies and thrips, and very low population at the beginning of the year. And once you actually have the favorable conditions in terms of higher temperature and relatively high humidity inside the tunnel, in this case, especially starting from March and then all the way to late April, you can actually see the population really on the rise very quickly. And later on, they actually reduce significantly before we finish the final harvest of the tomato. So you can actually see the thrips actually coming in earlier than the whiteflies in this particular case. So another aspect of this project led by Dr. Dr. Susie Legisby at USDA ARS is on the push-pull strategy and companion planting to see how we can actually use that so-called dual strategy to help manage insect pests in organically managed high tunnel systems. So again, we can actually set up a way to include the push components to try to repel the pests. And then at the same time, we can actually have a pull component, or you can call trap crops, to basically help to attract the pest away from the cash crop. So again, she has done some very interesting work to try to make recommendations in terms of the push component, especially utilizing some of the perennial flowering plants as repellent plants grown together with your cash crop to help push the pest away, and also at the same time to have so-called refugee plants, especially in a companion planting setting, flowering plants to help attract beneficials to help promote biological control. So in this particular case, the push-pull strategy worked pretty well inside the high tunnel situation to really help lower the population of pests, as well as increasing the level of biological control by attracting different types of natural enemies. Especially, for example, in this case, she pointed out the population of minute pyrobugs, as well as different types of whitefly parasites actually increased in their populations during the test period. The last piece I want to share today is on the growers' assessments that we conducted a very unique approach led by Dr. Mickey Swisher to actively involve growers in terms of helping us assess our research progress by inviting them to observe directly treatments in the high tunnel plots, and again, guided discussions following the field observations to identify research needs and to identify limitations of our research trials so that we can actually make adjustments along the way to basically design and fine-tune our research trials. So I highly encourage you to reach out to her if you're very interested in this particular approach in terms of stakeholder engagement. And lastly, I want to show you some interesting results from the grower surveys that we conducted to try to understand growers, especially organic growers, their perceptions of using high tunnels in high-value organic vegetable production. So we asked them in terms of how they perceive in terms of the benefits of using high tunnels to promote organic vegetable production. You can actually see in this particular survey, we had over 60 respondents, and around half of them were actually high tunnel users, and the other half were considered non-users. So you can see that really it doesn't matter if growers have used high tunnels in growing vegetable crops. They agree that high tunnels could actually help reduce nutrient losses and improve nutrient use efficiency, and also is a great way in terms of supplying local fresh produce to the local community, and also to reduce energy use in terms of cutting down transportation, and also the improvement of yield and crop quality definitely agreed among organic growers. Doesn't matter if they have used high tunnels or not. And also they agree that high tunnel can be a very important risk management tool to help alleviate the damages or reduce the losses caused by severe weather conditions, and also improving air quality, reducing transportation. But you can also see that a lot of people also had neutral opinion about that in terms of air quality. So again, those findings verified those benefits highlighted by an RCS program in terms of providing financial and technical support to growers in terms of high tunnel adoption and also management. So in terms of the financial profitability, growers also think that over the long run, high tunnels could be a major contributor to really help them improve long-term economic viability. And also high tunnels also could make vegetable growers, especially in this case, organic growers, more competitive in the market. So again, very positive responses from growers in terms of high tunnel adoption and also how they actually understand the benefits, opportunities in terms of using high tunnels to promote organic production. Coming down to some specific factors affecting high tunnel adoption or how likely growers would use high tunnels, especially those who haven't considered using high tunnels in the past. So we actually saw that three major factors perhaps would impact, again, this particular study surveying growers primarily took place in Florida. So again, this may not represent responses or factors identified in other places. But in this study in Florida, we saw that if growers were well aware of the NRCS high tunnel program, they probably would more likely to adopt or to use high tunnels for organic production. And also some of the key farming characteristics may also play a certain role. For example, whether they own the land and how big the farm is. Mostly the growers we surveyed, they actually produce on less than 100 acres. So most of them are considered small farms. But some of the analysis also show that farms that are of smaller sizes, well, with higher sales value, growers actually tend to be more willing to use high tunnels. So this is quite interesting. So that means that the farming size, as well as the growing of or production of high value crops, would actually be some major considerations in terms of high tunnel adoption. Speaking of social demographic characteristics in terms of their impact on high tunnel adoption, we saw that the non-Hispanic groups are more likely to, again, in this small survey conducted in Florida, more likely to use high tunnels, and also white producers may be more willing to consider using high tunnels, and also growers with higher level of education may actually be more willing to adopt high tunnel production to promote organic vegetable. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm willing and looking forward to more discussions following my discussion. And I also like to put up all the contact information there for my colleagues and also my co-authors for this particular webinar presentation. I purposely removed Dr. Legaspe's name here because she just recently retired. And if you have any questions about her study on push-pull strategy, please feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, we can also help to reach out to her. But again, you have all of our contact information here if you would like to discuss more later afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was a really informative presentation, so much packed into about 45 minutes or so. So we're going to move on right away to our question and answer time. And I just wanted to remind you all that the recording of this presentation will be available within a week on the eOrganic YouTube channel, along with all of our many other webinars, including some recent ones about biocontrol. Okay, so question here from Ken. He was wondering, with fogging, increasing leaf wetness periods, would that not potentially cause more disease issues in the high tunnels?
That is a valid concern. Yes. So you got to be a little careful there. And also in this particular case, Dr. Coulon, his group, they looked at a canopy fogging. So I don't think they looked at other heights. So yeah, that's another consideration there. So you have to watch for potential disease problems if you're using the fogging system in terms of the duration, in terms of the height above the canopy to set up the fogging or misting system. So that's definitely a valid, I would say, concern there. But it will depending upon the disease problem that you're facing, depending upon the resistant cultivar that you may be using. But there is probably a potential risk there.
Okay, thank you. Was there any examination or details on soil salinity increases with the organic fertilizers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in this particular study, as I mentioned earlier, you probably saw that on the slides that in Central Florida, where our research site was, in this 3-year study, the soil is very sandy in its texture and very low organic matter content. You can actually see that the soil that we actually use has relatively low water and nutrient retention capacity. So in that case, I know that in many other regions, especially in the northern region, and where continuous cropping systems have been practiced inside high tunnel structures in the soil-based system, the increase of soil pH and EC levels is actually presenting a major concern. But in our 3-year trial here in Citra, North Central Florida, we really have not seen major changes or increases in terms of soil EC. But again, keep in mind that the studies that we conducted within that 3 years, we're using different types of organic amendment in terms of compost and different organic fertilization management practices using different types of organic fertilizers, and also the use of cover crops in rotation with both leafy greens and tomatoes. So we're trying to again create a system that is reflecting. I know we're probably still far away from a commercial production system where crop rotation and biodiversity intercropping systems are commonly practiced by organic growers for high tunnel systems. But in that case, by involving crop rotation, by looking into integrated approaches in terms of managing soil and nutrients, again, in that 3-year period, we did not see, any, I would say, major impact in terms of those management practices on soil pH, on soil EC. But in terms of using soil amendment, in terms of compost, we are seeing those beneficial impacts especially over longer term, to actually improve soil organic matter content, especially considering how low our organic matter content was at the beginning of the trial, and also the overall soil health and fertility levels. Also in comparison with the use of cover crop. Again, this is really a stepping, I would say just a stepping stone here in terms of conducting systematic studies in the Southeast to look at organic vegetable production in high tunnels. We still have a long way to go because this is what I feel in terms of doing research. When you finish a project, you actually raise more questions that will lead you to developing, new projects down the road. So again, we were actually really excited. We were actually intrigued, and we became very excited in terms of, the findings we had to really try to answer the questions maybe in the future in terms of the impact of using cover crops in high tunnels. And again, across different regions here, we focus mainly on soil that is very sandy and low in organic matter content. And in this case, in this first study, we only looked at cowpea at the summer legume. So we did not use a mixture. We did not use non-legume species. So a lot of unknowns there. But that encourages us, to actually explore the use of cover crops. In this case, we saw a lack of impact, not only of cover crop, again, summer legume, cowpea, not only on crop productivity, but also on a number of soil health and quality indicators. So that really intrigued us. And to see, how cover crops are being incorporated into the crop rotation system in high tunnels for organic crop production, because for annual cropping systems, crop rotation is required for certified organic production. So again, I think we definitely need longer term studies here to answer many questions. But long story short, probably provided too long of an answer. But again, I think we will need to continue our study to to really examine the shorter versus longer term impact of those different soil nutrient management practices, programs on soil fertility and soil health, and also taking into consideration the complexity of cropping systems involving crop rotation, intercropping, and different strategies for enhancing biodiversity on site.
Great. We did have a webinar a little while back on cover crops in high tunnels. So while you're answering the next question, I'll go ahead and look for the link to that in case anyone is interested. We have a few more questions coming here. So we had one that was in the chat about whether or not there are any alternatives to plastic.
Yes, that's a very good question. From my experience, also my interactions with growers, I felt like I've seen really different philosophies and perspectives in terms of using plastic mulch in organic production, regardless of production systems, whether it's protected using high tunnels or soil-based open field systems. So some growers really try to stay away from using plastic mulch. And by the way, if you're using plastic mulch, in organic systems, you have to remove them by the end of the season. You cannot leave them in the field or till it in. And anyways, and biodegradable mulches, that's another really area. And I think many of researchers in organic vegetable production are actually actively exploring right now. So anyways, yes, so the use of plastic mulch, for example, here in Florida for vegetable production really offers multiple benefits to growers in terms of suppressing weeds. So this is really the major application of mulches, plastic mulches here in organic vegetable production. On the other hand, I feel like growers, especially some local small growers, in organic production, they're very creative in terms of integrating different management practices and try not to, use a lot of plastic mulches. So they're using cultivation, for example, and they're using actually tarp or ground fabric that actually offers them multiple season benefits. So again, not just like one season use of plastic mulch, but something can be used as a weed barrier and offer them a longer effect in terms of weed control. But again, speaking of long-term sustainability, I definitely think that we need to come up with creative, innovative, and integrated strategies to perhaps reduce the use of plastic mulch if possible in organic cropping systems. But again, it really depends in terms of priorities and specific production issues that growers are facing. So plastic mulch as a production tool could be considered if other management practices did not work very well. For example, using cover crops, using organic mulches and using conservation tillage and no-till systems. So again, to me, as I said, I agree that we need to look into new areas in terms of reducing plastic mulch, but in many cases, growers actually do need to use plastic mulch to help manage weeds. And also, for example, in the sandy soil conditions, it also helps to reserve soil moisture and help to reduce leaching as well. So there are other benefits and also warming up the soil. So again, hopefully we will be able to develop more integrated approaches and trying to reduce the use of plastic mulch in organic farming. I do think that there is a concern out there, but again, growers will have to evaluate in terms of different tools and practices on site to actually fit their needs.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we had a question here from Gladys about how you calculated the overall fertility score, and can you show the equation? I don't know if you have that handy, but if not, you could always communicate with each other afterwards.
Yes.
But
So
yeah.
I have to say that, yeah, thank you very much for the question. We may have to communicate offline about that because I know that my graduate student actually also spent time, a lot of effort to communicate with the commercial company who actually tested our samples and worked with us in terms of interpreting the results. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to have a very short answer in terms of the formula, the equation, but long story short, different indicators or parameters measured to assess soil health in this particular case, they were factored into the calculation or formulation of this overall fertility or overall soil health score.
Okay, well, I think we've reached the end of the questions here. So I'd like to thank everyone for submitting those questions. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to find the recording on the eOrganic YouTube channel. And we'd be really grateful if you could fill out our follow-up survey. So thank you so much, Dr. Zhao. And we look forward to future webinars with you. And thanks again to the Organic Farming Research Foundation for organizing this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you again for participating in the seminar. Thank you again for the great opportunity.